So much can happen in a day. 24 hours packed with possibility. 1,440 minutes wondering, what if? 86,400 seconds willing, waiting, wandering. 525,600 minutes of, it'll get better, because it can, it will, it must. How many minutes? No, moments in a revolution. See, I've run out of decimal places calculating the fraction of time it takes to quotient justice when the odds are stacked against us. What happens when the numbers dwindle? When clocks tire, when air holds its breath? What does silence sound like? Maybe it's not the absence of sound, but the presence of promise. A beat before the hymn begins, a cry before the hush is expelled, a pause before the world exhales. Is silence a weapon or a wound? A mighty noise or a quiet tune? A space for death or where healing takes root? You see, even in silence, something lives. The wind, the weight, time itself. And in that still resistance dwells, refusing to accept silence as nothing else. Resistance becomes liberation, breaking chains to bring forth change. Liberation becomes freedom, a movement rising to higher ground. Freedom becomes power, building and healing to imagine a new world. Power becomes love, a dance that never ends. Love becomes joy, boundless, unafraid, unrestrained. And joy becomes peace, whole, alive, full. Peace makes space for rest, not surrender, but a breath. The right to relax, the time to reflect. Poet Audre Lorde told us, poetry is not a luxury. It's a vital necessity of our existence. You see, poetry is how we survive, how we challenge the narratives that are simply handed to us. And in that spirit, poets become architects of curiosity. We don't just listen to silence. We interrogate it. We ask, what does silence sound like? When I heard former Vice President Kamala Harris say, what can be unburdened by what has been. Now, my initial response was, But the more I sat with it, the clearer it became. That is the work of the poet. To look beyond the weight of history and imagine new possibilities. To break the status quo. To ask, what if? Because poetry is a radical act. One that reminds us we're not just individuals. We're voices, we're forces, we're movements. And when we refuse to hold back, poetry's power becomes limitless. I started my poetry journey in middle school. I was simply writing to process my ever-evolving emotions. I never intended to share until a classmate of mine saw me writing and asked to read a piece. Reluctantly, I let her. She told me that my words resonated with her, and from then on, she became my audience of one. I continued to write, but we lost touch. By high school, I was attending open mics regularly, not yet performing, still in the shadows, observing how poetry and spoken word captivated and moved people. It wasn't until after college when I started realizing the power of my own voice. And what became an audience of one turned into an entire community of people finding our voices through poetry. When have you broken through the silences of life and reclaimed your voice? While realizing the power of my voice, I wrote a poem called We Are One. It's the beginning of a 3-part poem exploring our shared existence and ancestral unity. Remember who we are. Not kin by blood alone, not solely flesh and bone, but links in a never-ending chain of history strong. A history so indestructible it's embedded in our DNA. We are anchored to those who've come before us and those we've come through. We are spirits having the natural experience while tapping into our supernatural existence. We are portals of power that provide the pulse of the nation. See, nothing and no one can break us. We have been and always will be. Without us, there is nothing. We are a resilient tribe, speaking back to the void. In the silence, we thrive. Breaking through the challenges of these systems, screaming, I am alive. See, sometimes it takes community to remind us that our voices matter. And sometimes it takes a poem wrapped in music to ask the silence what it really means. Last year, I was in the studio with my friend Jake. The world was feeling very heavy, but I was still clinging to some semblance of hope. I looked at him and I said, man, lately I've been thinking about dying, but maybe I just want to live better than this. We carried the weight of that statement and built a beat so strong, I tried to write to it, but nothing landed. Until he looked at me and he said, Cyd, I just hope God saves me a seat. That changed everything. I got in my car and on the way home, I freestyled, giving birth to my song, Save My Seat. It's moments like this where silence ushers us into quiet but very unexpected but necessary moments. You see, poetry is liberation. It allows us to think freely, challenge definitions, systems, and labels. It calls us to ask, what if? And imagine different futures, reclaim space, speak truth to power, and just make things better. So I ask again, what does silence sound like? It sounds like a future waiting to be written. It sounds like you. Tonight, write down one question you've been afraid to ask, one truth you've been afraid to speak. Let that be your beginning. Because to be curious is to be defiant. And defiance is freedom. And freedom refuses to remain silent. Dare to challenge those silent moments in your life. Dare to resist. And most of all, dare to write poetry.